So now, ladies and gentlemen, we're on track, but last week, Forum representatives had the opportunity to meet with Jessica Roswell, Commissioner for Environment, Water Resilience and a Competitive Circular Economy. This was mentioned earlier on. And she was impressed about the focus today on both soil and water. It seems appropriate then, at this point in the day, ahead of our final inspirational talk by Fred Buyle, that we share the Commissioner's message to this conference that she sent this morning, which I will now read out. We can no longer take water for granted. We have to work together to build a water-resilient Europe, which is why I will present a European water resilience strategy. I want farmers to be part of the solution because farmers are the first in line when it comes to the effects of water and soil degradation. We need to make a collective effort, farmers, industry, citizens, to use water more efficiently. At the same time, we have to make sure that farmers can thrive and benefit from a sustainable income. That is why I also want to boost innovation and develop new ways of financing, including through the bioeconomy and nature credit schemes. Farmers have to be rewarded for nature-positive action. So I think, thank you very much indeed, Ms. Roswell, for sending us that message today to the forum. Very pertinent points, and of course the water resilience strategy, as far as I understand, it is due to be published in May or June of this year. So wise words indeed coming from the Berlaymont building. So perhaps the perfect segue now to our next inspirational speaker. I would now like to welcome on stage Belgian freediving legend and world record holder, photographer and explorer, Mr. Fred Buyle, who is going to deliver his inspirational talk. We heard from Mike, the astronaut, first thing this morning. Now we're hearing from Fred, a free diving legend, as he's described. And his talk will be on diving for answers to agri-food system transformation. He first explored the depths of the beautiful ocean when he was just 7 or 8 years of age. And he will be sharing some of his stunning photographs from the deep blue. Please give a warm round of applause to Fred Buyle.
Microphone? Okay. Sorry. So I have only 10 minutes to talk about 45 years of ocean exploration. So I tried to navigate you through my journey and how I got here today. So as a little boy, a Belgian boy, you would ask, how did I get involved into freediving? We're from a small country with only 60 kilometers of shore. The sea is terrible. But actually, I was sailing a lot with my parents when I was a kid. We were spending 2 months a year on a sailboat. My parents were not diving at all. They just loved the sailing. And I was always spending hours looking at the sea, contemplating what could be under the mirror of the surface. And when I was 7 or 8 years old, I started to explore naturally with a mask and snorkel, like a lot of you probably did. And that was a revelation. And I knew it would be my life and my life journey. Then afterwards, studying, being at school, traveling with the parents, starting to dive more and more, really fueling that passion for the ocean. In the early 90s, I got drawn into freediving competition. It was the moment the sport became a sport. Before, it was an obscure activity practiced by a few kind of guru-type people. But in the 90s, it started to be an organized sport, and I started at that point. So it was a 10-year journey from like 92, 94 to 2004, in which I gathered 4 world records, spending most of my time in the water. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself, of course, about how to play with the ego. The ego is good to pass obstacles, but also you need to be able to put the ego aside when people tell you, don't do that, maybe it's better you do that. I met a lot of people, a lot of different culture. So for me, it was a very, very important time in my life. But I still had in mind that the reason I was diving was not only for the records and going deep. It was to explore and trying to spend time with the inhabitants of the ocean, the fish, the big fish, and everything that was swimming in there. So naturally, I mean, it was not very natural. You know, every athlete at the end of his career needs to find a second career, and it's always a time of, I would say, flotation in between two worlds. And for me, what I found was to embark on the underwater photography journey. I always loved photography, and I wanted to show the underwater world in the most natural way. And so I became an underwater photographer. When you're an underwater photographer, you need to find subject and stories. The first stories I was following was, of course, the freediving competition, because I knew everyone in the freediving circus, and so it was easy for me to access to the World Championship and document that. But it's very boring at some point to take picture of people going up and down a rope. It's always the same. And so I decided to go more into finding the animals and telling stories like that. At that point, that was more than 25 years ago, I already knew about issues in the ocean and the problem the ocean were facing. So I said, I need to do a series of photos where I put a free diver with wildlife in order to tell a positive story and show that we can coexist. And of course, I went around the world with friends, with freedivers, and taking pictures of them with animals. And then that was a turning point at some point. In 2007, of course, conservation issues is a big problem, but we need to talk to the general audience with that. And how can we move general audience to be interested in conservation? We need to work with iconic species. And what else than the shark is an iconic species? I'm from what I call the Jaws generation. A lot of you here are from the same generation, which means I grew up as a kid with that famous movie with that giant shark eating people, boats. At some point, he even eats an helicopter, I think. And half of my friends were terrified of sharks because of that, and half of them loved sharks. So I tried to explore that path and started to take pictures of freediver with sharks. So we started with small reef sharks and bigger reef sharks, and then sharks, bigger sharks. And then in 2007, we started working with really big sharks that were supposed to be super dangerous, like what you see on the screen here, which is a tiger shark. Back then, it was almost inconceivable to just free dive and enjoy the company of a predator that's like 4 meters long. But with this picture, we could show that it was possible. The idea was not to do a publicity stunt, but was to show the coexistence and that these animals are not the monster that they are portrayed in the media, and we could change that. And then, of course, going further with the sharks, at some point, what's left, it's the great white shark, the one from the movie. The first time you get into the water with a great white shark, you hear that these 3 notes of the movie soundtrack, I promise. And then you see the shark coming towards you. You have no cage, you're in the middle of the ocean, and then you say, maybe that was not a good idea at all. And then the shark comes closer and closer and closer, and then he turns to avoid you, and you look in his eyes, and you see a mix of fear and curiosity, exactly what you feel. Because we're just two beings being there, trying to gauge each other, and the shark doesn't know what you are. He's a bit afraid because he's a top predator. Top predators are always very careful because they cannot afford to get hurt. And so the whole situation changed. You start to interact with that creature that's supposed to be super dangerous. But at the end of the day, everybody can do that. I've taken kids freediving with great white sharks, but please don't do this at home. Then the next step for me was to go a bit further in the conservation. And I started to do stories about scientists on the field, doing marine biology study and studying sharks and whales. And I noticed that scientists were not very good at getting the message out to the general audience. So I helped them with that. And spending time with them, at some point they realized with my abilities with freediving, I could help them in their work. And so I started to be a marine biologist and placing tags on sharks. Here you see a hammerhead shark with a tag on his back. The device planted in the sand is a receiver. And the combination of that helps us to monitor the movement of a shark, the local behavior, but also we have satellite tags that tracks migration patterns. And then we can make a difference because all this data, it's science-backed data, help us to implement conservation measures. Like in the Eastern Pacific, in Malpelo Island, for example, in Colombia, we were able to extend the protection area of the national parks by 80%, just because we could prove the migration pattern and where the female hammerhead were giving birth. So it was another way to make a difference. And now I reside in the Azores Island, and I work with the University of the Azores, and we developed non-invasive technique where we go and place tags by hand on the sharks. Here you have a blue shark. We just go and put the tag on the animal. The tag stays on the animal for 72 hours, and then we recover the tag, gather the data, charge the battery, and redeploy. So it's a totally sustainable way of working. Here we work also with manta rays. We do the same. We put kind of color around them, and we gather this data. So all that to say that, of course, it's nice to talk about positive imagery of the ocean and the work we do, but we shouldn't forget that what we don't see under the mirror of the surface is that in the last 50 years, we've lost 90% of the predatory fish, including tuna, marlins, swordfish, and sharks. 90%. And of course, we don't see that, but the study shows it. And I make the parallel with what happened in agriculture. The ocean is extremely important for planet Earth. We should call it planet ocean because it's 75% of the planet is covered by the ocean, by the way. If the ocean dies, we all die. And agriculture is linked very closely to the ocean because at the end of the day, what you put in a river or on a field, when you spray it, will eventually get into the ocean and create a problem that we didn't think about. And I will finish on the fact that our environmental problems, in the Azores I see a lot of problems with the weather, the climate change, the weather patterns in 5 years are totally off the scales. The water temperature increase a lot. The solution to agricultural problem, ocean problem, world population, feeding people, can only be a systemic approach. We cannot just act on little things. That's what 45 years in the ocean showed me, and the last 25 years working with scientists. And so we really need to get all the forces together and work on every aspect of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think a lot of us would echo that. The idea of a systemic approach is pretty fundamental. I just wanted to ask you 2 quick questions, Fred. Your friends who were on the anti-shark side, did they engage with sharks afterwards, after your photographs, after your tracking, after your marine biology? And you were saying that your friends were divided into 2 when it came to sort of dealing with sharks. What was the upshot at the end?
Yeah, because, you know, people are afraid of what they don't know. So if they get to know their fear, they will overcome it. It's always like that. And the shark is one of the primal fear of humanity, you know. It's the cold, the beast lurking in the depth or in the forest. So the shark talks a lot to people. That's why it's an iconic species that's easy to use to engage people. And every time I've brought someone who was super afraid of sharks in the water with sharks, they were convinced that they were totally okay, and they became advocate for them afterwards.
And this idea of the planet-ocean conservation message, do you think that's getting out there? Or do you think it's getting lost in all the pell-mell that we're...
It's getting out there, and it was getting very much out there until 2 years ago when we started to talk a lot about the war in Ukraine, and I don't even mention now with what happened in US. You know, in our science program we have in Azores, we have funding from university in US, and the scientists start to become very worried about the future, and we will have to cut some programs. So of course it's not the geopolitical situation is not great for us at the moment, but we still need to get that message out. And I think the young people, they got that message. Okay. They got it, and they are our best asset to move forward.
They're our ocean activists. Well, we're not at all jealous that you're going back to the Azores this evening, Fred. Listen, Fred Buyle, ladies and gentlemen, free diving, a legend, and